they're not having access to that mode of contraception. And nearly half of the estimated 56 million abortions carried out worldwide each year are unsafe. It means it's being done in places that are not accredited to do so by persons who are not accredited to do so as well. And 95% of the world's births among adolescent girls occur in developing countries. And of course, Ghana then features very prominently in that because we are still a developing country. And growth of cities, the statistics say the world's population totals 7.6 billion and expected to reach 10 billion by middle of this century. Asia is about 50% an urbanized while Africa is still predominantly rural. That's about 43% of that. Africa and Asia are home to nearly 90% of the world's rural population. And Tokyo, the world's largest city with 37 million inhabitants, followed by Delhi with 29 million and Shanghai with 26 million people, and gradually Ghana seems to be joining that statistics. But I'm joined in studio by DSP Dr. Faisal Ayamvila. We're going to be talking about family planning. Good morning, Faisal.
Good morning, Amma.
The statistics there are a bit alarming, and I mean that we read for unmet contraception need is really worth talking about. But let's start off with people's myths concerning family planning and what they think is true, but what really the situation is. Then, of course, maybe you want to explain to us what family planning is in total.
Okay. Well, so family planning services largely comprise medical and social activities through which individuals may be able to determine the number of children they want to have and then the spacing they want to have in between the children. And so that's what it really is. Very well.
So for people who would say that, I mean, I'm not using a family planning method because I've seen or I've heard it makes me put on weight. Is that the truth? Do all family planning methods predispose you to gaining weight?
You know, with regards to family planning methods, you'd want to talk about the reversible ones and then the irreversible ones. The reversible ones are either use the hormonal form or use the condoms or the barrier methods. The statement you made is typically with the hormonal, people complain that when they use the hormonal family planning or contraception, they put on some weight. But it's not true in its entirety, first of all, and it's a very misleading statement because it's only 20% of women who may put on some weight when they start hormonal family planning. And this can be offset by exercising and things like that. So it's not entirely true. Most women would not put on weight anyway. And if you do, you could always do some exercise.
Very well. So you mentioned rightly some reversible and irreversible family planning methods. Can you just take us through those?
Okay, so you know it takes two to tango. You have the egg that's released by the female and the sperm released by the male. And then when the two fertilize, then there's implantation, there's pregnancy. And so you're looking at methods. Well, the reversible ones are what we usually talk about. The irreversible ones are for people who are absolutely sure they do not want to have kids anymore. There are two main methods. For the men, we have what we call the vasectomy, where we tie the tubes. You know, there's a tube that brings the sperm from the testis and it's released. We tie that tube. And then in women, we have what we call the tubal tying or ligation, where we ligate the fallopian tubes, and so the egg is not transmitted into the womb. So those are permanent for people who are done. The reversible ones, well, what I like to talk about most are the barrier methods, because the barrier method will give you protection from sexually transmitted infections as well. That's the condom, which is very common and it's easy to get, and then what we call the cervical cap, the diaphragm, which is less common. But then, of course, you can use the hormonal type, and this is where the problem is. The myths always starts that you put on weight and things like that. These tend to be very effective. The myths are out there, and they are not entirely true. So you have the injections. Some people take an injection every 3 months. You can have the pills. You take some tablets every single day to prevent the female from releasing an egg that would lead to pregnancy. And then lately we have the patches as well. So these are reversible. But the irreversible ones are for people who have had, let's say, 4 or 5 children. And they are sure that they are done.
Well, it can even be 2, so far as they've made up their minds that they are done.
Exactly so. And that's why we want to use the broader term, family planning. Because when you talk about contraception, it's just an aspect. Family planning also has to do with us going out to talk to the teenagers about reproductive health, the need for them to use condoms. And then all these other aspects fall within the broader definition. That's why of late we use family planning.
Great. So let's watch a piece on family planning so that you can understand a bit better what we're talking about. And then we'll come back in studio to discuss it.
Timing and Spacing of Pregnancy faith-based project is aimed at involving religious leaders in efforts to reduce maternal mortality, primarily in rural areas. The project further seeks to encourage family planning methods for youth in rural areas who tend to get pregnant early. In Ghana, 30% of married women have an unmet need for family planning services, while 17% have an unmet need for spacing and 13% have an unmet need for limiting. Director of Family Health Division of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Patrick Kuma Abuaje, says government is instituting measures to incorporate family planning into the National Health Insurance Scheme.
We are building capacity of community nurses and auxiliary nurses to also offer services across the country in implant and long-term methods to improve access to family planning. There's also the plan to introduce health insurance as part of the benefit package for health insurance, and we are believing that that will improve access to family planning services, especially for those who feel that financial access may be a barrier.
Recent studies have recognized the unique and vital role of the church, mosque and faith-based groups in successful developmental work, especially in developing countries.
Well, and those are the statistics for Ghana concerning family planning. But Dr. Faisal, let me also ask this contraception as well. That's why we have the ascendancy of unsafe abortions.
Amma, is very sad. I've often told this tale of, let's say you being in London, a 16-year-old daughter will be called by the parents and advised on what to do to prevent pregnancies, for example. But that doesn't happen over here. We don't talk to the youth. We don't talk to the kids about what they need to do to prevent pregnancies. Then when they get pregnant, they go to all these facilities that are questionable and offer very quack services. And unsafe abortions kill so many of our ladies. This is also preventable if we look at it beyond the hospital. You want to involve religious leaders, for example, to talk to the children about the fact that they have to abstain, and if that's not possible, they could use the condom, for example, very easily accessible, to prevent the need for us to go through this unsafe abortion practices.
So, as a doctor, what would you advise your client, who, a female of course, who is having issues where she thinks she's done with her family in terms of looking at maybe her health condition, but her husband has not necessarily approved for that family planning method to take place?
This is a daily debate in the hospital where the woman wants to call it a day, and then the man still wants to have extra kids. It's all about communication. The right, now it's being touted as a human right to be able to determine how many children you want. And so it's all about communication and counseling. I would do my best to counsel the husband on the need to have a certain number of children, of course, for economic reasons as well, school fees and other things. And sometimes with the counseling, then the men see the need to be able to, the need to side with the women when it comes to issues of contraception.
When we talk about contraception and family planning, we tend to focus on women. But when it comes to the men, concerning the very permanent methods, African men have this idea that once you have, vasectomy, you can't have sexual interactions with your wife, and that prevents them from even accessing. Is this a reality?
Another entirely mythical statement. It's a big myth, because all we do is we stop the transmission of the sperm from the testes through the urethra. So it's more like we are blocking the sperm from coming out. It has nothing to do with your erection. Okay. Your erection would be perfect, it would be maintained, you'd perform as well as you did even before the procedure. So it's not true that it would bring down your manpower. It will just keep it at the same level.
Very well. But now also in modern times, you marry and the first thing they're asking is, when are the children coming? But let's say the family has decided to use contraception. What advice do you have for the relatives, the extraneous people who are giving you the advice and the pressure? How would you advise them? And also because sometimes people say when they start family planning ahead of attempting to give birth, it takes a longer time. Is this also true?
Well, Amma, from this discussion, we've seen that there are a lot of myths out there that we need to dispel. The first thing about family planning is to know that the couple have the right to determine when they want to have their first child and when they intend to proceed with activities leading to that. And so they must be given the free will to do so. It's not a human right, actually. And also you'd want to look at the benefits. You talk to the external family members about the fact that maybe this is a couple that would want to attain a certain health or financial level or status before they embark on having children. when you talk about the benefits, you realize that the people begin to side with you, and then these things become easy to implement.
Very well. On that note, it is World Population Day, and we have been talking about family planning because that's the theme for World Population Day 2018. It is a human right, and so men and women alike, let's support one another. After all, it's a couple that has to decide when and how they want to have their children, and so let's give them the free will to do so within the right, atmosphere. Let's all encourage them. Family members, let's stay away and let the couple enjoy themselves, and of course the young ones as well. Let's advise them to engage in safe sexual practices so that our proportion of unsafe abortions will be reduced. On that note, I have been speaking to DSP Dr. Faisal Ayambila, and would like to say a very big thank you for joining us. And that's a wrap